And joining us live on the broadcast, Mr. Rajaputran, what do you make of these protests today? Some very dramatic visuals coming over there. The protesters, of course, are refusing to back down. So is the security deployment, resorting to firing tear gas. What can we expect next? Should we expect a repeat of what happened on Saturday, as the protesters seem all set to enter the Prime Minister's office now?
Well, this needs to end right now. This needs to end right now. The Prime Minister needs to resign right now. Even though the President has promised to resign on the 13th, he still hasn't resigned. And the Prime Minister has declared a state of emergency, and he's not allowed to do that because he's not the executive president. So right now, as an MP, as you can clearly see, you are very much up to date on what's happening on the ground. What needs to happen right now is the international community needs to intervene. India needs to intervene. The United States need to intervene and ask the Prime Minister to step down immediately, because during the last stages of the war in 2009, thousands of people were killed and the war was not stopped. Right now, it's a situation where the Prime Minister refuses to resign and is seeming to get ready or prepare to take the protesters on with the heavy military presence in Colombo. And you see that the protesters are not going, they're going to be unstoppable, because the country is asking the president and the prime minister both to resign. And if the prime minister hopes to stay in power by force using the military, it's going to be very unpleasant. So I really like to urge the international community to intervene, the European Union, India, all the United Kingdom, all the countries, Japan, everybody needs to speak to the prime minister right now and ask him to resign, to make the transition smooth. So there is no way that Sri Lanka is going to accept Ranil Wickremesinghe as the acting president. There is no way that Sri Lanka is going to accept anyone from the ruling party, the Podujana Peramuna, which the President Rajapaksa and the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister Rajapaksa, his brother Basil Rajapaksa, and them belong to. It's their party. The people in Sri Lanka are not going to accept a president or a prime minister who has the backing on the support, who is backed by the government party, who are the sole responsible people for this crisis. So we need to look at somebody that the people accept to take on this role for this transition
Mr.
period.
Rajaputran, how confident are you that that the Prime Minister is not going to resign and that he will take over as the interim president, considering it was on 9th of July itself that Ranil Wickremesinghe tweeted saying that he would be resigning if Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns, and that is something that is on the lines that we are expecting the resignation to be announced today itself.
Well, I am not confident at all that the Prime Minister is going to resign, because if he was going to resign, all he had to do this morning was issue a statement that he's going to resign today, and that he is working out transitional arrangements. So the way the military is lined up, the way they're gearing up for Prime Minister to stay in power. So if there was any chance that the Prime Minister was going to resign, he should just make a statement right now, and I'm sure the protesters will all go back home and Sri Lanka will go back to peace. These protesters are not demanding for anything else other than just a resignation. It's only a flick of the pen. If the Prime Minister does not know how to type the letter, I can type it on his behalf and send it to him. All he has to do is sign it. So I'm sure 22 million Sri Lankans are ready to prepare the letter if that's what's taking time. So, you know, I strongly feel that the Prime Minister is not in the mood to resign at all. And that is why the military is being brought in. So I would like to urge the international community not to watch, not be spectators of this current situation, because I know that the country, it's not always possible to interfere in another country's affairs, but in a crisis situation like this, it's the responsibility of the international community to intervene, so we don't see chaos in this country, and especially India does not want its neighbor to be so unstable, because we are so close to India. We are almost closer to Jaffna Peninsula is closer to India than closer to the capital city. So I would really like to see the international community intervene and urge the Prime Minister to step down. That is the only way, because the protesters are not going to back down. There's curfew has been imposed, but all you see is more people coming into Colombo. And today being a public holiday in Sri Lanka, because it's a full moon day, there are going to be more and more protesters who are going to come to Colombo because today is a holiday.
Mr. Rajaputran, India has already extended its support for a peaceful transition of power, and we are very much with Sri Lanka, as has already been announced by the External Affairs Ministry in our country. There has already been a lot of economic assistance granted to Sri Lanka.
We are very thankful to the government of India for all the economic support, because without the support of India, Sri Lanka could have not survived the last 4 months. And we are very thankful to the government of India and also to the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister who sent essential supplies. But right now, what we need is a very strong message to be sent to the Prime Minister, and more than urging them, an intervention is needed to stop this crisis.
Mr. Rajaputran, the other question that is plaguing Sri Lanka right now is what happens constitutionally I know it is still in the realm of speculation that Ranil Wickremesinghe might just resign, but if he resigns, what is the process that will be followed to ensure that there is a democratic and a smooth transition of power?
Well, if the President and the Prime Minister both resign at the same time, next in line is the Speaker. So the Speaker will be appointed as the acting Prime Minister for a period of time, and within that period of time, we can find somebody that the people. It is important that the public accept the next leader. It's not important that because right now in Parliament, Rajapaksa's party has 2/3 majority in Parliament, so the opposition has very limited numbers. So for an opposition MP to prove majority in Parliament is going to be very difficult. So they need to make way for a minority government if that's what it takes. So and the Speaker can take over, and then the Speaker can appoint somebody whom the public accept. It's important that the public of the country accept the person who is going to be the leader of the country for the transitional period. It's not, but unfortunately, the Rajapaksas and Ranil Wickremesinghe seem to be thinking along the lines that they have majority in Parliament, therefore that they can still stay in power. But it's not about who has majority in Parliament,
Mr. Rajaputran,
who has majority support of the people.
What would you like to say about the escape plan of the Rajapaksas? How do you see the role of the international community, considering we all know that he's landed in Malé in the wee hours of today, and that was something that was negotiated by the Maldivian parliamentary speaker, and we all know that Rajapaksas are now expected to head to the UAE eventually. How do you gauge the international assistance that he's received so far for this passage?
I'm not able to comment on the Maldivian speaker facilitating because these are all unconfirmed news to me still. But however, the international community should stand by the country and the Sri Lankans. The international community should not stand by Gotabaya Rajapaksa or any individual. They should stand with the 22 million people in Sri Lanka. And it's important, and UAE, if they think that they're going to give Gotabaya Rajapaksa safe haven, UAE being a Muslim country, they should be aware that Muslims were not even allowed to bury their loved ones who died from the COVID-19 pandemic, because Rajapaksa, who is a racist, did not allow the Muslims to even bury their loved ones according to their religion. So if the UAE is going to help Rajapaksa find a safe haven in UAE, they will be they will be counterproductive to the Muslim community in Sri Lanka as well. The Muslim community, in fact, the countries of Islamic, I think it's the IOC, Islamic Countries Organization,
right,
urged the Rajapaksa government to allow the Muslims to bury their loved ones when they died, but the Rajapaksa government never listened to it. And hundreds of Muslims who died in the COVID-19 pandemic, their bodies were forcefully cremated. Even a body of a 1-month-old child who died of the COVID-19 pandemic was cremated.
Last but not the least, Mr. Rajaputran, I'm going to also ask you to focus on the economic impact of what's happening in your country right now, because we've already learned that after the Maldivian president actually fled the country, there's been an impact. Bonds have fallen to a fresh low itself. How do you see the protests now impacting the economy, especially taking into consideration the last few days ever since what's happened at the presidential palace on Saturday?
Well, every single day that the Rajapaksas have refused to resign, and every single day that from now onwards that Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Prime Minister, refuses to resign, is going to severely impact Sri Lanka's economy. And Sri Lanka, our foreign reserves are next to zero. As a bankrupt country, I think we really need to come out of this crisis ASAP. And the political crisis and the economic crisis are connected to each other. There is no way that we can address the economic crisis till we address the political crisis, because even for IMF negotiations, it should be a leader who is trusted by the country who's going to do it. So the country's economy is going to further collapse, and we don't have fuel right now. Everything has come to a standstill, and schools have come to a standstill. So basically it's going to only get worse. And all this could have been averted when the protest first started, when Gotabaya Rajapaksa himself said that it was a mistake to ban fertilizers, said that he made a mistake by not going to the IMF earlier.
Right.
And when he held the dollar by force at 200, when he used our foreign reserves to pay for foreign loans, then itself he should have resigned. So we could have averted this crisis.
Right.
So in terms of the economy, I think it's very hard to speculate anything, or it's very hard to just single out the economy on its own, because there is no way forward for the economy or the share market or any investment unless this political crisis is resolved.
Absolutely, and we are going to be, I think Sri Lanka is certainly going to need assistance from the IMF as well. Having said that, Mr. Rajaputran, many thanks for joining us on this newscast. And with that, let's now shift our focus back to ground zero, where Purnima Murli continues to report for us. Purnima, it's back to you. Could you take us through all the latest that's taken place so far?
Well, protesters continue to gather outside the president's office. You can find that protesters are only entering this lane that leads to Prime Minister's office. Even though tear gas has been fired multiple times, they refuse to leave the place because they say that if the president resigns, then what next is that Prime Minister of Sri Lanka will be made the interim president, which is Ranil Wickremesinghe. And they want the resignation of not just Gotabaya, but also Ranil, because they think that he is someone who's protecting Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Will the protests continue? Do you see it continuing here?
Yes, they will continue their protests until the Prime Minister is resigned.
Okay.
That is, this protesters is expecting now.
What are the problems that Sri Lankans face? There's a lot of anger against the current politicians, whether it's president or prime minister. What are the challenges and difficulties that you're all going through here?
Actually, due to this current crisis situation, all the Sri Lankan citizens are fed up with this current government. They want to chase out this government from the Sri Lanka. That's right. Now they want to again they are fighting against Ranil Wickremesinghe to resign from his position.
So, chorus growing louder for the resignation of not just President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, but also Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. If President resigns by evening, sources say that he could go to another destination, and then later in the evening there will be an official announcement. After that, Ranil Wickremesinghe will be the interim president till Parliament comes to a consensus on who could be a permanent or who they could appoint as the president till Sri Lanka goes to polls again. And here at the Prime Minister's office, even as Ranil may become the interim president, chorus for Ranil Wickremesinghe's resignation is growing louder. You can find more and more protesters from the golf face are now marching towards the Prime Minister's office. Here at the Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister's office is heavily guarded by the army personnel. Police officers we saw a few minutes ago leave the Prime Minister's office, but heavy deployment, army officers deployed everywhere to ensure that these protesters do not storm the office. Therefore, whenever crowds swell outside the Prime Minister's office, what you can see is tear gas being fired, and then they try to disperse the crowds. The crowds disperse, and after a few minutes, again they go back and raise slogans against Prime Minister outside the gates. For the last 1 hour, these are the dramatic scenes that are unfolding outside Prime Minister's office. Crowds only swelling. It started with the students' march towards Prime Minister's office, and now the protests are snowballing. We'll have to wait and see how whether these protesters will be able to enter the Prime Minister's office, whether they will be able to storm the Prime Minister's office. But at the moment, more and more protesters joining the initial students' protest, and now you can see this entire stretch is occupied by protesters. They do not want to disperse. They do not want to leave. Their message is now the resignation of both President and Prime Minister, and that's what we've been hearing from many of them who are waiting here to see when the official announcement of President's resignation will be made.
Purnima, we'll request you to stay on with us. Good afternoon. You continue to be with us here at CNN News 18. I am Ridhima Bhatnagar. Dramatic visuals there coming in from the streets of Sri Lanka. This after the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was forced to flee the country. We're now getting information that he has now landed in Maldives and could eventually move from there as well. Remember, his initial plan was move to the United States, but there the visa wasn't given to him. There were multiple other reports that he could move elsewhere as well, but the information now coming in that he is in Maldives. But just look at the visuals that we are playing out on our screens. Anger continues to mount, not just against the president, but now against the Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as well. Purnima Murli continues to track all those developments for us. Purnima, let's first talk to you about the visuals that we're seeing on our screens. Anger continues to mount. If the initial demand of the protesters was for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to step down, now that anger seems to have shifted as far as the Prime Minister is concerned. I want to first understand, where do things currently stand? Where are the protesters protesting, and what do we know so far as the position of Ranil Wickremesinghe himself?
While protesters were calling today's day as a historic day because President is all set to resign, but that, so to say, could be in the evening, what really happens if President Gotabaya officially submits his resignation? Then the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka will be made the interim president, and that is Ranil Wickremesinghe. And the anger is not just directed towards the Rajapaksas, but also Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, which is why you can see here outside the Prime Minister's office, protesters are only increasing. More and more people are now joining the protests. This entire lane where the Prime Minister's office is located in Colombo, you can find scores and scores of protesters now marching from Golface and coming here. The slogans is not just the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, but they also want Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe to resign. And why Ranil now? Because they think that it's Ranil who is very close to the Rajapaksas, who's trying to protect the Rajapaksas, and therefore he should also step down. Which is why, even though the army personnel are trying to ensure that protesters don't storm the Prime Minister's office, protesters are trying to enter the place, and every time there are more crowds outside the Prime Minister's office, tear gas is being fired to disperse the crowds. Many of them have been taken in ambulances which are located here to nearby hospitals whenever there are tear gas being fired. But protests continue. Protests are only snowballing here because they want the resignation of Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ranil had made it clear that he will step down as a Prime Minister once an interim government is formed. But the opposition parties are struggling to form an interim government. They do not have the support, which is why a lot of dramatic scenes are unfolding here, because in all probability Ranil Wickremesinghe will be the interim president till the parliament convenes, till they nominate presidents and till they nominate people for president's post, and 20th is when there will be a vote to elect the president. Till then Ranil will be made the interim president if Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns by today, which is why you can find protesters here raising slogans against Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as well.
Purnima, we'll request you to stay on with us. We'll also request you to stay safe, requesting our video journalists also to stay safe. Let me introduce our guests who are joining us on this broadcast. We have former diplomat Ashok Sajjanar. We'll shortly be joined by Professor from the University of Kelaniya, Sri Lanka as well. Good to have you, Ashok sir, on the broadcast with us. I want to first talk to you about, as far as the escape plan of the Rajapaksas was concerned. The anger had been mounting for the last couple of months, and the sole demand was that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa needs to step down. He has been forced to flee Sri Lanka. But I want to understand, diplomatically speaking, how difficult will it be for him to move country to country? Because initially we were understanding he wanted to move to the United States. The visa was rejected. Certain reports suggesting he probably wanted to come to India. No permission was given there either. Diplomatically, how difficult is it going to be for the Rajapakshas to get some sort of clearance to even land in those countries?
I think it's going to be very difficult because we have seen, he is burnt his bridges as far as his own country is concerned. So I think it will be taken as an unfriendly move as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, if it were to give asylum to the Sri Lankan president who wants to flee. So now, right now, he's gone to Maldives. You have mentioned about the United States. You mentioned about India also. India has said that, we did not receive any request from Gotabaya Rajapaksa for coming to India. Now he's gone to Maldives. With Maldives and Sri Lanka, the relations have always been very close and friendly. He had wanted to go also to Dubai. We have seen the sort of indignities that were piled upon him last evening when he wanted to leave Sri Lanka, because he was really hounded out of the airport, and even the immigration authorities would not come to the VIP lounge to stamp his passport. So he was not given any of the courtesies that are due to the president of the country. So he, so much of indignity has been, and he has been in so much of dishonor. So I think he has brought it upon himself. The writing has been on the wall for quite some time, and he should not have delayed it so much. It is after Friday evening, when he fled, and Saturday the presidential palace and his official residence and secretariat was occupied. So I think the coming weeks and months are going to be difficult for the Rajapaksa brothers, but possibly it's going to be much more difficult for Sri Lanka and the common people, ordinary people of Sri Lanka who are fighting for the basics in their life today.
True. Sir, I'll just request you to stay on with us. I want to continue the conversation with my colleague who's been reporting for us from Colombo. Purnima, I want to understand there is a vacuum now as far as who is fit to lead the island nation. One, and secondly, more importantly, who is that one person who can take the island nation out of this turmoil, both politically and economically? As you were pointing out earlier, that now that the president has fled the country, possibly you will have Ranil Wickremesinghe who could become the interim president. But if both of them step down, because today the anger is for the prime minister to step down as well, what happens then? Do you have the speaker step in? Also, more importantly, parallelly, what are the kind of conversations that are on as far as the next person who could head the country?
Well, protesters who initially demanded the resignation of all the Rajapaksa family members now have gathered outside Prime Minister's office demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Remember, if Gotabaya Rajapaksa tenders his resignation by evening, which is what we are hearing, then the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka will be made the interim president, which is Ranil Wickremesinghe, and they don't want Ranil to be made the interim president. So even though they want to celebrate when Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigns, they will have to also wait for Prime Minister to resign, because they feel that Prime Minister is protecting the Rajapaksas. Many rounds of tear gas are being fired. You can find now protesters now running away from the place, because this for the last 2 minutes there are multiple rounds of tear gas being fired, and many of them have been injured. There are ambulances also ready for people who have been injured in this whenever tear gas is being fired, and they say that they want the resignation of Prime Minister Ranil also.
Other people are saying, don't go, wait. Yes.
So what is the message of all of you?
No, really, I am very sad about what is going on in this country at this time, because of this. The young boys are very suffering. They have a big plan. The Rajapaksa family had a big plan. They already put the Ranil to the Prime Minister as a Prime Minister.
So you think Ranil is Rajapaksa's man?
Really, of course. He want to deal with them. And that is... And...
Right. So, protesters here will not leave, is it?
No, we are not leaving here. Really, the Rajapaksa family have a deal with Ranil, and he will protect them. He is guiding them, and the only Gotabaya have gone abroad.
But if I can also show you on the screen, there's also a child who was at the protest site, and did you witness this tear gas? Are you okay? Are you okay? She's okay? No. Please, can you take her somewhere? See, even children are now participating in protest. She was somewhere closer to the place where tear gas was fired, and she's now being taken away from the place. But this time around, it's not students, it's not youth who are protesting. You can also find children also joining protests. And here, there are many of them who have been injured. You can also find children who are now trying to gather along with their parents here at the Prime Minister's office or outside the Prime Minister's office gate, raising slogans, and you can find a lot of dramatic scenes unfolding. Even children are being brought here. And if I can also go back to the gentleman we were speaking to, this time it's not about youth who are protesting. Children, students, elders, all of them, or people from all walks of life are protesting.
Yes, the students and the elders and the small people and all are coming for this protests. So the reason is they are now beginning to do another plan. That's why they know the Ranil has now Ranil turned into the president. So that's why they are not happy with the situation, because Ranil only one man in the parliament, no any other parliament
the
member.
other names that are coming up for the nominations for the president's post are Sajid Premadasa and Dalus. Are you okay with them?